A retired Navy SEAL heard glass break through the rain, but his old German shepherd was already at the door. Across the muddy road, a blind widow stood alone in her living room, trembling beside an empty wooden box. The thieves left her money, her jewelry, even the silver frames on the wall. They stole only her late husband's war medals, the last things her hands could still use to remember him. But hidden beneath those medals was an old photograph, and a name powerful men had tried to erase for decades. When Atlas refused to leave the widow's side, Brennan realized this was not a simple robbery. It was a buried betrayal coming back for the innocent. Stay with this story until the end. Then tell us where you're watching from. And if it touches your heart, please like and subscribe to help our channel reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories alive. Brennan Holt had not disappeared from the world. That was what people in town often got wrong. He was not poor. He was not helpless. He was not one of those broken men who wandered because they had nowhere else to go. Brennan had a house, though it was old and plain, set back from the road, where the pine trees leaned toward the roof like tired sentries. He had food in the pantry, firewood stacked beneath a tarp, and a truck that coughed twice before starting, but still started. What he did not have was a wish to be seen. After 22 years in the Navy, after missions he never described, and friends whose names he carried more carefully than medals, Brennan had retired into silence. He was 48 now, broad-shouldered and solid, with a square, weathered face, gray-blue eyes, sun-browned skin, and short, dark brown hair that the cold wind always seemed to push backward. A silver had begun to show near his temples. His beard stayed trimmed close, rough enough to make him look less polished than he actually was. Most days he wore the same old red and black flannel jacket, frayed at the cuffs, over a faded army green t-shirt, worn military pants, scuffed work boots, and an old field watch that still kept better time than most men. His only steady company was Atlas, a cream-gray German shepherd with a deep chest, thick neck fur, upright ears, and eyes that seemed to understand the parts of Brennan no human had been invited to touch. Atlas was old now, slower in the hips on cold mornings, but he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a retired soldier who had never worn a uniform. Across the narrow dirt road, about 100 meters from Brennan's house, lived Evelyn Carr. Her house was smaller than Brennan's, white once, though weather and years had softened it to the color of old bone. A yellow porch light burned there every evening, even in summer. Evelyn was in her mid-70s, blind, slight, white-haired, and kind in a way that did not ask permission from the world. She moved carefully, one hand often searching the air before finding the back of a chair, a porch rail, or the head of the dog who visited her nearly every afternoon. That was the simplest truth on that road. He would trot across from Brennan's yard to Evelyn's porch, collar tag giving a faint metallic clink with every step. Evelyn always knew it was him. She kept a small ceramic bowl near the door and saved soft food for him, nothing too rich, because she said an old gentleman should not ruin his stomach just because he had charm. Atlas never ate right away, and he would sit at this porch step and wait until Evelyn's thin hand found the top of his head. Only then would he lower his muzzle to the bowl. "Running away from your owner for snacks again, old friend?" she would say, smiling toward the sound of him. Sometimes she added, "A good soldier waits for orders, doesn't he?" Brennan pretended to disapprove. "Atlas," he would call from across the road, standing with his arms folded like a commander inspecting poor discipline. The dog would look back once, deeply unashamed, then return to eating. Evelyn would laugh softly. That laugh did something to Brennan he did not like admitting. It moved through the cold air and found small rooms inside him he had locked years ago. Evelyn never pressed him for stories. She never asked what he had done overseas, how many men he had lost, or why a man who could still carry himself like a fortress lived as though the town were a place he was only passing through. She simply treated Atlas like family, and because of that, Brennan tolerated being seen. Atlas helped Evelyn in small ways. If her cane slipped from the porch, he nudged it toward her hand. If a grocery bag tipped and spilled, he stood waiting instead of stealing the food. Once, when a black sedan slowed too long in front of her house, Atlas stepped between the porch and the road, head lowered, a low rumble in his chest. The car drove on. Evelyn had laughed after that, but her hand stayed on Atlas's back longer than usual. "Your dog has better manners than most men," she told Brennan later. "He knows when people are worth protecting," Brennan said before he could stop himself. Evelyn turned her cloudy eyes toward his voice. "So do you," she said. Brennan had no answer for that. The rain came on a Thursday night. It started slow, tapping the windows with the patience of fingers. By 9, it had turned heavy. Water streamed from the roof of Brennan's cabin and ran down the ruts of the dirt road. The woods beyond the house vanished into a wet, black wall. Brennan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold. Atlas lay near the stove, his bowl half-finished beside him. The dog had been restless all evening. He had risen twice to sniff beneath the front door. Once he walked to the window facing Evelyn's house and stood there so long Brennan looked up. "What is it?" Brennan asked. Atlas did not look back. The dog's ears lifted. Then came the sound. It was faint beneath the rain, almost nothing, a sharp, brittle note, like glass giving up under pressure. Atlas growled, not loudly, not wildly, just once, low and certain. Brennan was on his feet before the chair legs stopped scraping the floor. He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. Atlas was already moving, old bones forgotten, paws striking the porch boards, then the mud. The 100 meters between the houses had never felt long before, and that night, it felt like a battlefield under black water. Brennan crossed the road fast, boots sinking in wet earth. Atlas reached Evelyn's porch first and barked once at the door, not the bark he used for strangers, but the urgent, clipped sound he made when something was wrong and waiting was no longer allowed. The front door was not fully shut. Brennan pushed it open. "Evelyn?" No answer at first. Then a thin voice from the living room. "Brennan." He found her standing beside the table, one hand gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Her hair had come loose from its pins. Rain blew through a broken side window, scattering cold drops across the floor. Atlas went straight to her and pressed his body against her legs. Evelyn reached down blindly, found his head, and held on. "They were here," she whispered. Brennan scanned the room. His mind shifted without permission into old patterns. Entry point, broken glass inward, mud near the sill, drawer open but not emptied, valuables untouched. No random panic, no sloppy search. "What did they take?" he asked. Evelyn's mouth trembled. "The box." He followed her face the direction of her grief and saw the small table near the fireplace. On it sat an old wooden case, open and empty. No cash had been taken, no jewelry, no silver-framed photographs. The television still sat in the corner, useless and untouched. Only the medals were gone. Thomas Carr's war medals. Brennan called the police immediately. not because he believed they would understand. He had lived long enough to know the difference between a report and justice. But a break-in at the home of a blind widow needed to exist on paper, and it needed a number, a timestamp, an official record no one could later pretend had never been made. While they waited, he guided Evelyn into a chair and checked her hands, her arms, the side of her head. "I'm not hurt," she said. "You're shaking." "I'm old. We do that for many reasons." It was a brave joke. Too brave. Atlas lay at her feet and placed his muzzle on her worn shoes, exactly as he did on quiet afternoons. Evelyn's fingers moved over his ears, then his collar, then stopped. "He came," she said. Atlas heard something. "No," she said softly. "He came." Brennan looked away. The patrol car arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing red and blue against the wet windows. 2 officers stepped inside, rain dripping from their hats. They were young enough to still look uncomfortable in rooms where sorrow was older than they were. They did their job, and they photographed the broken glass. They asked Evelyn what she had heard. They wrote down Thomas Carr's name. But when Brennan told them the stolen items were military medals, something changed. Not cruelty. That would have been easier to confront. It was politeness thinning into dismissal. One officer asked, "Mrs. Carr, is it possible you moved the box recently and forgot?" Evelyn sat very still. The other said, "Items like that are usually more sentimental than financially valuable, but we'll include everything in the report." Brennan stood near the doorway, rainwater dripping from his jacket. His jaw tightened, but he did not speak. He had heard that tone before. Soft words used to bury hard things. To them, the medals were old metal. To Evelyn, they were sight. She had touched those medals every night for years. Thomas had placed them in her hands after her vision began to fail, and he had told her the story behind each one, not as a hero bragging, but as a husband trying to leave her a map of who he had been. One medal had a dent on the left edge because Thomas had dropped it on the kitchen floor the first day he came home, his hands still shaking from whatever he had refused to name. Another had a sharper rim where it had been repaired after a ceremony. The most important one carried a tiny mark hidden along the inner edge, something Evelyn had never seen, but had touched so often it had become part of her memory. After the officers left, the house seemed colder. Brennan stood before the empty wooden case. Atlas rose and came beside him. The dog lowered his nose to one corner of the box and sniffed for a long time. Then he backed away, ears flattening, a growl gathering low in his throat. Brennan crouched. The bottom of the box was not right. He ran one finger along the inside seam. There were fresh tool marks, small, careful, almost delicate, as someone had opened a hidden compartment beneath the lining. This was not a random thief. This was not some addict looking for jewelry. Whoever had entered Evelyn Carr's house had known what to look for. Behind him, Evelyn spoke. "There was a photograph," she said. Brennan turned. "What photograph?" "Thomas, in uniform, with other men. He kept it under the medals." Her voice weakened, but did not break. "He told me never to show it to anyone unless I had to." Brennan looked back at the box. The rain kept hitting the broken window, drop after drop, like a clock counting down. Evelyn's hand tightened in Atlas's fur. "Before he died," she said, "Thomas told me something strange." Brennan waited. She lifted her face toward his voice, blind eyes pale in the lamplight. He said, "If anyone ever comes for that box, don't believe they only want the medals." By morning, the rain had stopped, but the road between Brennan Holt's house and Evelyn Carr's looked wounded. Mud filled the tire ruts. Pine needles clung to the puddles. The broken window in Evelyn's living room had been covered with a square of plywood Brennan had found in his shed before sunrise. He had measured it, cut it, and screwed it into place without saying much. Quiet work steadied him better than coffee ever had. Atlas had not gone home. The old cream-gray German shepherd lay beneath Evelyn's porch step with his front paws beside the small ceramic bowl she normally used for his afternoon snack. His ears were relaxed, but his eyes kept watching the road. Every time a car slowed, his head lifted. Evelyn sat in the porch chair above him, wrapped in a pale shawl, her white hair pinned neatly, though the night had taken the strength from her face. At every few minutes, her hand drifted down until it found Atlas's head. The dog leaned into her palm without moving from his post. Brennan stood in the yard and watched them. He told himself he was only making sure she was safe until the sheriff arrived. That was all. A neighborly thing. A practical thing. He had retired from war and all its ugly little cousins. He had no badge, no team, no authority, and no appetite for stepping back into other people's darkness. Then Atlas shifted closer to Evelyn's ankle. As if the dog had already made a decision, Brennan was still pretending not to understand. To Atlas, Evelyn was not a case. She was the woman who saved scraps in a ceramic bowl, the one who knew the sound of his collar before she knew the weather, the one who spoke to him as though old dogs and old widows belonged to the same secret order. And if Atlas had decided she was family, Brennan could not stand across the road and call himself uninvolved. Sheriff Martin Kessler arrived just after 8. His cruiser rolled up slowly, tires pressing water from the mud. Kessler was a broad man in his late 50s, with a thick neck, short salt and pepper hair, and the tired, careful expression of someone who had spent years learning how not to say the wrong thing. His tan sheriff's shirt was neat beneath a dark brown jacket. His boots were clean enough to suggest he preferred offices to ditches. He stepped out, adjusted his hat, and gave Evelyn the kind of voice people used with the elderly when they wanted to sound gentle without being moved. "Mrs. Carr, I'm sorry this happened." Evelyn turned her face toward him. "Thank you, Sheriff." Kessler glanced at the plywood, then at Brennan. "Mr. Holt." "Sheriff?" There was no warmth between them, but there was history of a small-town kind. They had passed each other at hardware stores, gas pumps, veterans' ceremonies Brennan never attended. Kessler knew what Brennan had been. Brennan knew Kessler knew enough to be polite, and not enough to understand. Inside, the sheriff walked through the living room, asking the same questions the patrol officers had asked in the night. When had Evelyn last touched the box? Did she hear more than one person? Had any strangers come by recently? Did she keep a list of the medals? Did she know their approximate value? At that word, value, Brennan looked up. Evelyn sat straight in the armchair. "They were my husband's." "I understand," Kessler said, writing something down. But for the report, we need to estimate monetary value." "There isn't one." Kessler paused, then nodded with the patience of a man closing a door gently. "We'll keep an eye out," he said. "Sometimes items like that turn up in pawn shops or estate sales." Brennan watched him. Someone broke a window, crossed her living room, ignored everything easy to sell, opened a hidden compartment in a military case and took only the medals. That doesn't sound like a pawn shop problem. Kessler's pen stopped. For the first time that morning, the sheriff looked at him directly. "Mr. Holt, I appreciate your concern, but we need to be careful about building a large theory out of a small burglary." Atlas gave a low breath from the doorway. Not a growl, not quite. Kessler glanced at the dog, then away. Brennan did not press. Not yet. And he had learned long ago that some men revealed more when they believed they had ended the conversation. When Kessler left, he promised to follow up. His cruiser turned around slowly and disappeared down the wet road. Evelyn listened until the engine faded. "He doesn't believe it matters," she said. Brennan looked at the empty space where the wooden case sat on the table. "No," he said. "He believes it would be easier if it didn't." The first real clue waited at the back fence. Brennan found it after returning to the window, the sill, the muddy patch beneath it, and the narrow strip of grass leading toward the trees. The mud there was redder than the rest of the soil around Evelyn's house. Clay heavy, almost rust-colored. Not impossible for the area, but not common on this road. Atlas sniffed it, then moved toward the fence line. A thread of black fabric clung to a splinter near the loose gate latch. Brennan lifted it carefully with the edge of a folded receipt from his pocket. It was not much, barely half an inch, but it had a sharp chemical smell beneath the rain and wood. Then there was the other scent. Cigarette smoke. Not the cheap kind from the gas station. Something darker, sweeter, expensive. It clung faintly to the corner of the wooden case where Atlas had growled the night before. Brennan had no lab, no warrant, no desire to play detective like a man in a television show. But he had eyes, memory, and a dog who knew the difference between ordinary and wrong. That afternoon, while Evelyn rested, a small blue hatchback pulled up near the porch. The woman who stepped out looked too young to be carrying as much guilt as she did. She was maybe 30, with shoulder-length chestnut hair tucked messily behind one ear, a denim jacket damp at the collar, and a canvas bag hanging from one shoulder. She held a notebook against her ribs like it might protect her from what she had come to say. "Mrs. Carr?" she called gently. "It's Maggie Ellis, from the Sentinel." Evelyn's face softened with recognition. "The young woman who wrote about Thomas?" "Yes, ma'am." Brennan came out from the side of the house. Maggie noticed him and stiffened a little. And most people did at first. He had the kind of stillness that made strangers check their own posture. "I heard about the break-in," she said. "I'm so sorry." Evelyn reached for the porch rail. "You were kind to write about my husband." Maggie swallowed. "That's why I'm here." She opened her bag and pulled out a folded copy of a newspaper. The page had been handled often enough to soften along the creases. Brennan saw the headline before the photograph. "Local widow keeps husband's war memory alive." There was Evelyn on the porch, seated beside the wooden case. Atlas lay at her feet, his muzzle resting near the hem of her skirt. The ceramic bowl was visible near the step. The case was open just enough for the metals to catch light. Maggie's voice thinned. "I thought it was beautiful. I thought people should know about her. About him." Brennan took the paper from her and studied the image. And it showed more than kindness. It showed the box, the porch, the fact that Evelyn was blind, the quiet road, the trusting dog. A map, dressed as tribute. Maggie saw his expression and seemed to shrink beneath it. "I didn't think anyone would use it like that." "No," Brennan said. He folded the paper carefully. "Decent people usually don't." That made it worse for her, not better. She returned to her car and brought back a small laptop. On the porch table, she opened the folder of original photographs from the interview. There were dozens. Evelyn smiling with her hands on the box. Evelyn holding a medal between two fingers. Atlas half asleep beside her shoe. The porch from several angles. Then Brennan saw it. On the lid of the wooden case near the brass corner was a faint marking he had not noticed the night before. A unit insignia, worn down almost to a shadow. "Oh, can you zoom in?" he asked. Maggie did. The symbol sharpened slightly. Not enough for certainty. Enough for recognition. Brennan felt something old and cold move under his ribs. Maggie whispered, "What is it?" "A mark someone might recognize," he said, "if they were looking for it." That was when Maggie mentioned Nora Whitcomb. Not eagerly. Carefully, as though she were opening a door to a room where someone had once been hurt. "She used to work investigations for a regional paper," Maggie said. "Military fraud, stolen memorabilia, fake charity auctions. She got pushed out after a legal threat, but she was looking into something like this." Stolen medals? Not just medals. By evening, Nora Whitcomb was sitting at Brennan's kitchen table. She was in her mid-40s, narrow-faced, with dark hair tied low at the back of her neck and a gray trench coat that looked permanently tired. And she did not waste time on comforting expressions. Her eyes moved over Brennan's house once, then over Brennan, then to Atlas, who lay near the stove and watched her with the bored suspicion of an old guard. "So," Nora said, setting a worn folder on the table, "someone finally took something from the wrong widow." Brennan did not smile. "You know who did it?" "I know the kind of people who would." She opened the folder. Inside were photocopies, auction screenshots, obituaries, police summaries, and photographs of medals in display cases. A silver star from an estate in Montana. A Purple Heart group from a dead Marine's family in Idaho. Letters from a Korean War veteran, sold under private provenance. Every item had once belonged to someone old, alone, or easy to dismiss. "Most families reported theft," Nora said. "Most reports went nowhere. The items reappeared later through private brokers or closed auctions. Clean descriptions, anonymous collections, no questions from buyers who didn't want answers." She slid one printed page across the table. At the top was the name of a business. Graves and Vale Historical Auctions. "Lowell Graves," Nora said. "Very polished, very generous in public. Funds veteran banquets. Donates to local heritage projects. Smiles like a man who has never stolen anything with his own hands." Brennan looked down at the page. There was a listing in a private catalog. Car Valor Set. Private provenance. Sealed family case. The words were clean, almost elegant. Nothing about Evelyn. Nothing about broken glass. Nothing about Thomas Carr's hands placing those medals into his wife's. Nora tapped another sheet. "This didn't come from the buyer catalog. Internal note. A source owed me a favor." Brennan read it. Hidden compartment confirmed. Photo recovered. For a moment the room became very quiet. Even Atlas lifted his head. Maggie, who had been standing near the counter, covered her mouth with one hand. Brennan looked toward the dark window. Across the road, Evelyn's porch light glowed through the trees, small and stubborn. The medals were bad enough, but the photograph meant the thief had not come only for memory. He had come for a secret. Later, after Nora left and Maggie drove home with red eyes and a promise to send every file she had, Brennan opened the newspaper again. He spread it flat on the table under the yellow kitchen light. Atlas rose slowly and came beside him. The dog lowered his muzzle, not onto the picture of the medals, but onto the small ceramic bowl near Evelyn's porch, half visible at the edge of the photograph. Then Atlas looked up at Brennan. Brennan did not believe in omens. He did not believe dogs carried messages from the dead, or that fate spoke through the weather, or that the world arranged symbols for men too stubborn to listen. But he believed this. An old dog knew where he felt safe, and someone had just turned that safe place into a target. Nora Whitcomb did not like working from hope. She liked paper, dates, names, smudged signatures, places where a lie had been written quickly enough to leave a seam. By 9 the next morning, Brennan's kitchen table had become a poor man's war room. Maggie Ellis sat with her laptop open, her sleeves pushed to her elbows, the guilt from the day before still sitting in her shoulders. Nora stood beside her, one hand on the back of a chair, staring down at two versions of the same photograph. Brennan stood across from them, arms folded, silent. Atlas lay near the stove, but he was not sleeping. Every few minutes his ears twitched, following the small sounds in the room. Maggie's finger tapping the trackpad, Nora's pen clicking once, Brennan's slow breathing. On Maggie's screen was the original scan from her interview with Evelyn. Thomas Carr stood in snow up to his boots, younger than Brennan had imagined him. He had a narrow face, a tired smile, and the stiff posture of a man trying not to show pain in front of a camera. Around him stood 5 other soldiers in winter gear. One of them, slightly behind Thomas's shoulder, was a younger Wallace Breen. Nora had found his current image online the night before. Today, Wallace Breen was an old man with silver hair, a controlled public smile, and a reputation polished by veterans' boards, military heritage foundations, and donor dinners. But in the old photograph, he was simply a young officer with sharp eyes and the posture of someone already practicing command. Maggie zoomed in. "In my version, everyone's face is clear," she said. Nora placed a printed page beside the laptop. It was the same photograph, but copied from an internal file connected to Graves and Vale, and the quality was worse. The contrast had been pushed too hard. Someone had marked notes along the margin, and one face had been blacked out, not blurred by accident, not lost to damage, covered. A man at the far left of the group had been erased with a thick smear of black. For several seconds, no one spoke. Brennan had seen plenty of ugly things done to bodies, but there was something colder about what had been done to that face. A body could be buried. A name could still be spoken. A face in a photograph was proof that a man had stood somewhere, breathed cold air, cast a shadow, belonged to a moment. Someone had tried to take even that. Maggie whispered, "Why would they do that?" Nora did not look away from the page. "Because the wrong dead man is more dangerous than a living witness." That sentence changed the room. Brennan felt it land in his chest like a dull round. Until then, the case had been theft, cruelty, and an old widow's grief. Now there was another shape beneath it, a deeper one. Something military, something covered. Something that had survived long enough to become valuable to men who preferred clean rooms and private auctions. Nora opened another folder. "The soldier marked out is Elias Vane," she said. "Officially killed in action during a mountain operation. But the report has problems." She laid out the pages one by one. Different dates, a location code that had been typed over, a witness statement with a missing second page, a casualty summary signed by an officer whose name was almost illegible. Brennan did not touch the papers at first. He only looked. Old reports had a smell even when printed fresh, not paper and ink, habit, procedure, men using narrow lines to contain wide disasters. "Who found the body?" Brennan asked. Nora's mouth tightened. "That's one of the problems. The report says recovery was completed by the extraction team, but the attached weather log says no aircraft could land in that sector for 36 hours. Maggie looked up from the laptop. "So maybe the report was wrong?" Brennan finally picked up one page. "Reports are wrong when men are scared," he said. "They're clean when men are protected." Nora watched him for a beat, as if filing away the answer. "There's one man still alive who knew Thomas from that unit," she said. "Howard Bell. He's in a care home 30 minutes from here. I tried calling last year when I was chasing graves. He hung up the first time I said Elias Vane." Brennan looked at Atlas. The dog lifted his head. "I'll drive," Brennan said. The care home sat beyond the edge of town, where the road flattened and the trees gave way to winter-brown fields. And it was a small place with pale brick walls and flower beds that had been cut down for the season. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner, old coffee, and the soft sadness of people waiting for visits that did not always come. Howard Bell sat near a window at the end of a quiet hall. He was thin enough that the blanket over his knees seemed heavier than he was. His hair was white and sparse, his skin folded deep around the eyes. One hand shook slightly even when resting. But when Brennan entered, Howard looked up with the quick suspicion of a man who had once learned to read danger before it spoke. "No reporters," Howard said. "I'm not one," Brennan replied. "Nobody ever is when they first walk in." Brennan pulled a chair closer but did not sit too near. Atlas came in slowly beside him, nails clicking once on the floor, before he settled at Howard's feet. Howard looked down. The old man's expression changed before his words did. "That dog been to war?" "No," Brennan said, "but he knows how to listen to fear." Howard stared at Atlas for a long moment. The German shepherd lowered his head to the floor and breathed slowly, steady as a hearth in winter. Some men could not talk while being questioned. Some could talk only when something in the room stopped demanding courage from them. Howard's fingers relaxed on the blanket. "Thomas should have burned that photograph," he said. Brennan said nothing. Howard looked toward the window. But he was never good at letting the dead disappear. The story did not come all at once. It came in pieces, like a man removing stones from a grave with bare hands. Elias Vane had been young. Too young, Howard said, though war had a way of making that word useless. The operation had gone bad in the mountains. Snow, bad coordinates, bad orders, men separated in whiteout conditions. Officially, Elias was killed during enemy contact. Unofficially, Thomas believed Elias had been left behind after a command decision no one wanted written down. Thomas tried to make noise, Howard said. After they came home, filed questions, asked for location logs, asked why the recovery report didn't match the weather window. What happened? Howard gave a small, bitter laugh. What always happens when a decent man pushes against men with cleaner shoes. He looked down at Atlas again. They told him to let the dead rest. Told him Evelyn could lose benefits if he kept stirring trouble. Told him his memory wasn't reliable. Combat stress, survivor's guilt, all those pretty words they use when they want a man to doubt his own eyes. Brennan felt an old anger move in him, but not hot. Cold anger was worse. It lasted longer. Did Thomas have proof? Not enough. A photograph, some notes, and a mark. What mark? Howard closed his eyes. N-17. The air in the little room seemed to tighten. He'd say it in his sleep, Howard whispered. N17. Not the wrong coordinate. The changed one. And that was where Elias stayed. Brennan leaned forward. Stayed? Howard's eyes opened, wet and furious with age. Men like me use soft words when hard ones would kill us twice. Atlas shifted and placed his muzzle gently against Howard's slipper. The old man's shaking hand came down, almost by accident, and rested on the dog's head. Thomas wasn't a coward, Howard said. But they made him choose between truth and Evelyn's safety, so he hid what he had. Not because he gave up, because he was waiting for someone who could carry it farther. On the drive back, Brennan did not turn on the radio. Atlas slept in the back seat, worn out from the care home and the emotions humans leaked into rooms. Brennan kept both hands on the wheel and watched the road unspool ahead of him. He had told himself for years that retirement meant release. No more orders. No more men whispering into radios. And no more waiting for a decision made by someone far away to ruin men standing close enough to bleed on you. But some wars did not end when uniforms came off. Some simply changed clothes. Deputy Cole Ransom was waiting near Brennan's driveway when he got home. He stood beside a dark county cruiser with the engine off, hands tucked into the pockets of his duty jacket. Cole was in his early 30s, lean, clean-cut, with light brown hair and a face that still looked too honest for the job he had chosen. His uniform was neat, but the man inside it looked frayed. Brennan stepped out of the truck. "Sheriff send you?" Cole shook his head. "That's the problem." Brennan waited. Cole glanced toward Evelyn's house, then back at him. "Kessler told me to leave the car burglary alone. Said it was already logged and not worth stirring people up." "People?" "Donors. Board members. Men who like their names on plaques." Brennan's eyes narrowed. Cole swallowed. "My father served around some of those men. Different years, same circles. Before he died, he said something I never understood." "What?" Cole looked embarrassed by the memory, as if repeating it might make him sound like a child still chasing ghosts. He said, "Don't trust metals that look too clean." Brennan looked past him to the road, to the 100 meters between his house and Evelyn's. Then Atlas barked once from the porch. Not warning. Calling. They found Evelyn inside, seated in her chair with a small package on her lap. No return address. Brown paper. Twine tied neatly around it. "I thought it might be from the police," she said. Brennan took the package carefully, opened it, and found a medal wrapped in cloth. For one foolish second, Maggie, who had arrived behind them after Cole called her, covered her mouth as if relief might be allowed. But Atlas stepped back. Just half a step. His ears lowered, and he gave no greeting to the thing in Brennan's hand. Evelyn held out her palm. "Let me." Brennan placed the medal gently into her fingers. The room fell silent. Evelyn touched the face of it first, then the rim. Her thumb moved slowly, searching. She turned it over, felt along the left edge, and stopped. Her expression changed. Not confusion, recognition of absence. "No," she said. Cole looked at Brennan. Evelyn's thumb moved again over the smooth metal where a dent should have been. "Thomas's had a small nick here," she whispered. "Left edge. He dropped it on the kitchen floor the first day he came home. He laughed because I scolded him for denting a medal before denting a saucepan." Her fingers closed around the fake. "This one is too smooth." No one spoke. Evelyn lifted her face toward Brennan's voice, though he had not said anything. "This is not Thomas's." Atlas walked to her and put his head on her knee. Brennan watched her hand tremble against the dog's ear. In that moment, the case became clear in a way no document had made it. Whoever had sent the medal was not returning anything, and they were testing her, testing whether a blind widow could still remember the shape of truth, testing whether love had a better memory than their lies. Brennan looked at the fake medal in Evelyn's hand, then at Atlas, still pressed against her knee. This was no longer something happening next door. This was the house Atlas had chosen to guard before Brennan had admitted it needed guarding. And Brennan, at last, stopped pretending he was only a neighbor. The town hall had been dressed up for gratitude. Red, white, and blue bunting hung across the old wooden stage. Folding chairs filled the room in neat rows. At the back, volunteers in sweaters arranged coffee urns, paper cups, and trays of cookies beneath a banner that read, "Honoring those who served." Brennan Holt stood near the rear wall with Atlas at his side and felt the familiar discomfort of public thanks. He had avoided rooms like this for years. The flags, the speeches, the handshakes from men who said, "Thank you for your service," and then looked relieved when the conversation ended. None of it had ever sat right with him. Gratitude was easy under clean lights. It did not smell like wet wool, cordite, bad coffee, or blood on snow. Evelyn Carr sat 3 rows from the front, Maggie Ellis beside her. But Maggie had insisted on bringing her, saying it would be better if Evelyn heard Lowell Graves speak for herself. Brennan had not liked the idea. Neither had Atlas. The old German shepherd stayed close to Brennan's leg, cream-gray fur brushed and dry, brown leather collar catching the light whenever he moved his head. He was calm, but not relaxed. His eyes followed the room in slow, deliberate sweeps. Deputy Cole Ransom stood near the side entrance in uniform, his jaw tight, one hand resting near his belt without touching it. Sheriff Martin Kessler was already near the stage, smiling at donors and shaking hands with the practiced ease of a man who knew exactly where every camera in the room was pointed. Then Lowell Graves stepped onto the stage. He was not what anger wanted him to be. Brennan had expected something colder, maybe sharper, a man with a predator's impatience. But Graves looked almost gentle beneath the lights. He was in his mid-50s, tall, lean, and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit beneath a charcoal overcoat he had not bothered to remove. His salt and pepper hair was combed back with quiet precision. A white shirt, a dark vest, polished black shoes. Even his smile seemed curated, warm enough for photographs, modest enough for trust. He placed one hand over his heart as the applause faded. "Every town," Graves began, "is built not only by those who live in it, but by those who left it to defend something larger than themselves." The room softened around him. That was his gift, Brennan realized. Not force, not fear, permission. Graves gave people permission to feel noble while doing nothing difficult. He spoke of sacrifice, of legacy, of preserving history. Before time and neglect steal it from us. He thanked widows, and he thanked veterans. He thanked families who had entrusted priceless artifacts to proper stewardship. At that phrase, Evelyn went still. Brennan saw it from the back of the hall. Her spine straightened. Her hand tightened around the handle of her cane. Maggie leaned toward her. "Mrs. Carr?" Evelyn did not answer at first. Graves continued, smooth as oil over black water. "Some items belong not in closets, not in attics, not forgotten in private rooms, but where future generations may understand their meaning." Evelyn's face lost color. Brennan moved before he had decided to. Atlas moved with him. They crossed along the side aisle, slow enough not to draw attention. When Brennan reached Evelyn's row, she turned her blind eyes toward his footsteps. "That voice," she whispered. Brennan crouched beside her chair. "Graves?" Her lips parted, but the first breath did not become words, and she seemed to be listening backward through time. "After Thomas died," she said, "a man called me. More than once. He said he worked with a military heritage organization." Maggie's hand went to her notebook, then stopped, as if she knew writing now would feel indecent. "He asked about Thomas's things," Evelyn continued. "His letters, the medals, the case." "Did he give a name?" "Not at first. Later, he said Graves." Her fingers trembled around the cane. "Lowell Graves." On stage, Graves smiled at the crowd. Evelyn's voice dropped lower. "He asked if I would donate the box to a private collection. Said Thomas's memory deserved a better place than my living room." Brennan felt something in him go very quiet. "What did you say?" "I told him Thomas had chosen that room." Her mouth tightened. "He did not shout. He did not threaten me. He only went silent for a moment, and then he said, 'One day, Mrs. Carr, you'll understand that some things belong to history, not to small houses.'" The applause rose again as Graves finished a sentence about honor. It was a strange kind of obscenity, Brennan thought, to hear people clap for a man who had spoken to a blind widow that way and dressed the insult as culture. Graves was not simply stealing. He was deciding who deserved to remember. Brennan stood. Atlas shifted at once, sensing the change in him. For one hard second, Brennan imagined walking down the aisle, stepping onto that little stage, taking Graves by the lapels of his expensive suit, and asking him in front of God and the town how much a dead soldier's memory weighed in a collector's catalog. The image came easily, too easily. His hands flexed at his sides. Then Atlas stepped in front of him, not dramatically, not with a bark. The dog simply placed his body across Brennan's knees, blocking the first step. He looked up, ears forward, eyes steady. Brennan looked down at him. A ridiculous thought crossed his mind. The dog had better tactical judgment than half the men Brennan had served under. He exhaled slowly. Courage was not always forward motion. Sometimes it was staying still while the right part of you caught up with the angry part. And if Brennan made a scene, Graves would win twice. By morning, the story would not be about stolen medals, a hidden photograph, or Elias Vane. It would be about a retired SEAL causing trouble at a veterans fundraiser. Evelyn would become a confused old woman surrounded by unstable people. Maggie would lose what little room she still had to publish. Cole would be buried under procedure. Graves would smile through the whole thing. Brennan touched 2 fingers lightly to Atlas's head. "Good call," he muttered. Atlas did not look impressed. He only sat down. At the end of the program, people stood in clusters, talking too loudly over weak coffee. Graves stepped down from the stage and moved through them like a man accepting tribute disguised as conversation. Brennan watched from the side wall. The Graves paused by an elderly veteran in a wheelchair, bent slightly to listen, then placed a hand on the man's shoulder at exactly the right moment. The photographer caught it. Of course he did. Nora Whitcomb appeared beside Brennan without greeting him. She had a way of arriving like an accusation. "You didn't hit him," she said. "Atlas voted against it." "For once, I agree with the dog." She held out her phone. On the screen was a spreadsheet, Small lines of names, dates, and donation amounts. "I pulled what I could on the public side," she said. "Graves has donated to the County Veterans Banquet for 6 years. Restoration Fund, memorial dinners, scholarship raffle, historical society partnership. Kessler. Sheriff's Office received equipment support through a community safety grant. Guess who sponsored the foundation that routed it?" Brennan looked across the hall. Kessler was laughing at something Graves had said. Not loudly, not like a villain, just a small laugh between men who understood the price of mutual convenience. Nora lowered the phone. Kessler may not be in the middle of it, but he has every reason not to look too closely. Cole joined them a moment later, his face pale with controlled anger. "I checked 2 old reports after you called," he said quietly. 2 other thefts. Same type of victims. Old military items. Both marked low priority. Both closed without follow-up. "By Kessler." Cole looked away. "By the department." Brennan heard what he did not say. In small towns, responsibility often wore many names, so no one man had to carry it. From across the room, Graves finally looked at Brennan. Only for a second. No surprise. No fear. Recognition. His gaze dropped to Atlas, then returned to Brennan's face, and he smiled politely, as if they had been introduced at a dinner neither wished to attend. Brennan did not smile back. By the time he took Evelyn home, the sky had gone dark blue and wind had started moving through the pines. Maggie walked Evelyn to the porch while Brennan waited near the truck. Evelyn stopped before going inside. "Did I make a mistake coming tonight?" she asked. Brennan looked at her, at the pale shawl around her shoulders, at the way one hand rested on Atlas's neck. "No," he said. "You recognized him." "I wish I hadn't. That's not the same thing." She gave a tired little nod. Atlas nudged her hand until she smiled. "Old beggar," she whispered. "You still want your supper after all this?" For the first time that evening, something gentle crossed Brennan's face. He left only after checking her doors, windows, and porch light. Atlas resisted going home, but Evelyn tapped his collar and said, "Go on. Your commander needs watching too." The dog obeyed. Brennan found the envelope when he reached his own porch. It sat centered on the top step, dry beneath the overhang, white against the weathered boards. He stopped before touching it. Atlas stopped too. The woods behind the house made no sound, except for wind moving through wet branches. Brennan looked once toward Evelyn's porch light, still glowing through the trees, then crouched and opened the envelope with the edge of his pocket knife. Inside was a photograph. Atlas on Evelyn's porch, his head near the small ceramic bowl, Evelyn's hand resting on his back. The angle was low, taken from near the road. Someone had been close enough to watch them. Brennan turned the photo over. A strip of brown leather fell into his palm, cut cleanly, the same color as Atlas's collar. Not the real collar, but close enough. On the back of the photograph, written in block letters, was a single line. "The old dog should learn to stay beside his bowl." Brennan did not move for a long time, and then he looked through the window at Atlas, who had gone inside and settled under the kitchen table, tired from the long evening. The dog's ears twitched in sleep. His paws moved once, chasing some harmless dream. For years, Brennan had believed fear belonged to the past, to rooms overseas, to radios going silent, to names spoken carefully over folded flags. He had been wrong. Fear could be a photograph on a porch, a piece of cut leather. The thought of someone touching the one creature that had stayed with him after the uniform came off. Brennan folded the photograph, put it in his shirt pocket, and locked the door. Across the road, Evelyn's porch light kept burning. For the first time since this began, Brennan understood that whoever stood behind the theft was no longer only reaching for Thomas Carr's medals. They were reaching into Brennan's house, and they had found the one thing there he could not bear to lose. The envelope changed the way Brennan listened to the house. Before, the old cabin had been quiet. Now every shift of wood sounded like a footstep. Every branch against the window became a hand. He slept in pieces that night, if sleep could be called that, waking whenever Atlas moved beneath the kitchen table. By sunrise, Brennan had already checked the locks twice, the shed once, and the road 3 times. Atlas watched him with the patient disapproval of an old dog who knew fear when it tried to dress itself as caution. Across the road, Evelyn's porch light was still burning. Brennan carried the envelope in his jacket pocket when he crossed over. He had not shown it to Evelyn yet. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment. The truth was uglier. He did not want to watch her fingers find the photograph of Atlas beside the ceramic bowl, when he did not want her to understand that her kindness to the dog had been turned into a weapon. Evelyn was already awake when he knocked. "I know that knock," she called from inside. "That is not a neighborly knock. That is a soldier bringing bad news, but hoping tea will soften it." Brennan opened the door and found her sitting near the kitchen table, wrapped in her pale shawl. Her white hair was combed neatly, as if order in small things could still matter after thieves had entered her home. Atlas went to her at once and set his head beneath her hand. "I want you to stay somewhere else for a few days," Brennan said. Evelyn's hand stilled on Atlas's fur. "Somewhere else?" "With Maggie, or a motel in town, just until this settles." "This is my home." "I know." "No," she said quietly. "You know what a house is. You do not know what this house is." Brennan did not answer, and Evelyn turned her face toward the room as if she could still see the walls. Thomas fixed that kitchen door after the hinge split in winter. He used the wrong screw and cursed at it for 2 hours. He read me letters by that window when my eyes started failing. He once burned soup so badly the pot went into the yard like a dead animal. A faint smile crossed her mouth, then vanished. "If I leave because they frighten me," she said, "it will feel as if Thomas has been taken from me twice." Brennan understood stubbornness. He even respected it. But respect did not make the road safer. "They sent a threat," he said. "I know. You don't know what kind." She reached for Atlas's collar and found it with careful fingers. Was it about him? That took the words from him. Evelyn's mouth tightened. "Then I know enough." Pressure did not arrive like a storm after that. It arrived like mold, quiet, spreading through corners. Nora Whitcomb called before noon. A lawyer representing Graves and Vale had sent her a formal warning, accusing her of harassment, defamation, and interference with lawful private commerce. She read the phrase aloud with such contempt that Brennan could almost see her face harden through the phone. Maggie's editor ordered her to stop contacting Evelyn, calling the earlier article a human interest piece, not an investigative series. Maggie sounded ashamed when she told Brennan, but not defeated. Cole sent one short message. "Kessler moved me to night traffic duty. Can't meet openly." That same evening, Evelyn's phone rang 3 times. Each time, no one spoke. Each time, Atlas rose from beside her chair and stood facing the dark window until the line went dead. The next morning, The threat became flesh. Atlas was lying near Evelyn's porch. His injured pride apparently healed enough for him to resume guard duty. Brennan had just finished replacing a bent latch on the back gate when a dark sedan rolled slowly along the dirt road. Not fast, not loud. That was what made it worse. The car drifted closer to the shoulder than it needed to. Atlas lifted his head. Brennan turned at the same time. The sedan swerved just enough. Atlas sprang back, old body twisting with more instinct than grace. The car did not hit him, but the sudden movement drove him sideways into the broken edge of the old fence. He yelped once, short, surprised, and dropped to one knee before forcing himself upright. The sedan kept going. For 1 second, Brennan was no longer retired, no longer careful, no longer a man standing in a yard with mud on his boots. He was movement. Then Evelyn's front door opened. "Brennan?" she called. "Atlas?" The sound of her voice stopped him more effectively than a command. He went to the dog instead. The cut was shallow but ugly, a torn line along the lower leg where the fence wire had caught him. Atlas held still while Brennan cleaned it, though his breathing came tight through his nose. The dog watched Brennan's hands, trusting him with that unbearable animal faith that never asked whether a man deserved it. Inside Evelyn's kitchen, Brennan wrapped the leg. Evelyn sat close enough to touch him. Her fingers found the bandage and followed it gently around Atlas's leg. Her face changed. "They hurt him? They scared him into the fence. That is the same cowardice in a nicer coat." Brennan looked up. Evelyn's hand rested on the bandage. Her voice, when it came, was softer than anger and heavier than grief. "They don't only steal from the dead," she said. "They threaten creatures that cannot lie." Something in Brennan gave way, not into rage but into shame. He had wanted to protect her by keeping distance, by staying controlled, by refusing to make her life part of his. That had always been his logic after retirement. If danger followed men like him, then kindness was safest across the road. But Atlas, wounded and still leaning toward Evelyn's hand, had never believed that. Well, the next morning, with a slight limp and a bandage around his leg, Atlas crossed the road before Brennan even finished his coffee. Brennan stood in the doorway and watched the dog make his slow way to Evelyn's porch. Evelyn was waiting with the ceramic bowl in both hands. Atlas reached the step, sat, and did not eat until she touched his head. "Still reporting for duty?" she asked him. The dog's tail moved once against the wood. Brennan watched from his porch. The distance between the houses looked different now, not like safety, like an excuse. He went back inside, took the photograph from the envelope, and laid it beside the notes from Nora. Then he called Maggie. "I need the gas station camera from County Road," he said. Maggie did not ask why. "I'll get it." The footage was terrible. Grainy, tilted, washed in gray light from a flickering pump sign. But it showed enough, and not the thief, the visitor. A woman in a pale blue-gray work jacket stood at the edge of the station lot 2 days before the break-in, speaking to a man whose face never turned fully toward the camera. She handed him something small. A folded paper, maybe. A key code, maybe. The camera could not prove intent. But Brennan knew the woman. So did Evelyn. Marcy Vale had been Evelyn's part-time care aide for nearly 8 months. She came twice a week to help with groceries, medication reminders, light cleaning, and the small domestic tasks Evelyn could manage but should not always have to. Marcy was in her mid-30s, narrow-shouldered, with tired hazel eyes and dark blonde hair, always tied low at the nape of her neck. She wore soft-soled shoes and pastel scrubs beneath an old fleece jacket. She had the look of someone who apologized to furniture after bumping into it. Brennan found her behind the community clinic after her shift. Marcy saw him and went white. That was enough. "I didn't break in," she said before he spoke. Brennan stood still. "Then start there." Her hands shook around the strap of her tote bag. "I didn't know they would hurt anyone. I didn't know about the photograph. They said it was just old medals. They said no one would miss them if they were replaced." "Who said?" Her eyes filled. "Graves." The name came out like something she had been holding under her tongue for days. Her brother owed money to men who collected for people Graves knew. That was how she explained it. Badly at first. Then with more detail as panic cracked her open. She had not opened Evelyn's door for them. She had not gone inside that night. But she had told them where the box was kept. Told them the back latch stuck, and told them Evelyn sometimes opened the case in the evenings when loneliness came too close. "They asked about the dog," Brennan said. Marcy shook her head hard. "Not me, I swear. I never told them about Atlas." Brennan believed that part, though he wished he did not. The men who watched Evelyn's house had learned Atlas's rhythm themselves. Afternoon porch, evening return, rain for cover, a blind widow alone. Marcy covered her mouth with one hand. "I thought they'd just take it and sell it. You thought grief was lighter if someone paid you for it?" She flinched. Brennan almost regretted saying it. Almost. He brought her to Evelyn before she could run from herself. Atlas knew her as soon as she stepped into the house. That was the cruelest part. Before the break-in, he had let Marcy scratch behind his ears, and he had once followed her from kitchen to sitting room because she carried biscuits in her pocket. But now the dog did not wag his tail. He rose slowly, bandaged legs stiff, and placed himself between Marcy and Evelyn's chair. No bark, no lunge, just a silent wall of cream-gray fur and old loyalty. Marcy looked at him and broke. "He knows," she whispered. "Doesn't he? He knows what I did." Evelyn sat very still. For a long moment, no one moved. The room seemed to hold its breath around the smell of tea, rain-damp wool, and antiseptic from Atlas's bandage. Evelyn's voice, when it came, was not sharp. That made it worse. "You used to pour my tea," she said. Marcy cried silently. "You read me the labels on medicine bottles. You told me when the lilacs came back. You held my elbow on the step when ice formed." "I'm sorry," Marcy said. "I'm so sorry." Evelyn's hand found Atlas's head and rested there. "Do you know what you helped take from me?" Marcy could not answer. Evelyn turned her face toward the sound of her. "You helped take the last thing my hands had left of my husband." The words landed softly, and because they were soft, they cut clean. Marcy sank into the chair by the door and told them everything she knew. Names were scarce. Graves kept himself clean, but she had heard enough. A private sale, a military collection, anonymous provenance, a deadline. And she would testify if someone could protect her brother. Cole arrived after dark in an unmarked truck, out of uniform for the first time Brennan had seen him. Without the badge, he looked younger and more tired. He listened to Marcy's statement at Evelyn's kitchen table, recording only after she gave permission. Then he stepped outside and made a call from the porch. When he returned, his expression had changed. "Her name is Rachel Mora," he said. "Federal investigator. Stolen property, historical artifact fraud, interstate private auctions. I sent her what Nora collected." "Mora interested?" Brennan asked. "Cautious," Cole said. One local burglary won't bring her in. But Nora linked at least 5 stolen veteran collections that moved through buyers in different states, and that changes the shape. What does she need? Something current. Something tying Graves to the car metals before they vanish into a private sale. As if summoned by that sentence, Nora called. Her voice was flat, which Brennan had learned meant the news was bad enough to require discipline. I found the listing, she said. Not public. Invitation-only catalog. Brennan put the phone on speaker. Nora read the title. Anonymous Military Valor Collection. Evelyn closed her eyes. Marcy began to cry again. Cole looked toward Brennan. When? Nora answered. Less than 24 hours. The kitchen went silent. Atlas limped to the ceramic bowl by Evelyn's chair and lowered himself beside it, tired but unwilling to leave. Brennan looked at the dog, then at Evelyn, then at the fake metal still wrapped in cloth on the table. Less than 24 hours. And this was not only a chance to recover Thomas Carr's medals. It was an invitation. A trap, perhaps. A test to see who would still walk into a room full of polished men and call theft by its real name. Brennan rested one hand on Atlas's back. For the first time since the envelope, his fear had a shape. So did his decision. The mansion had been built to look older than it was. Stone columns, tall windows, a circular drive lit by low amber lamps. The kind of place that told visitors history lived here. Though Brennan Holt knew money often bought age the same way it bought silence. Cars moved slowly up the drive. Black sedans, polished SUVs, one vintage coupe that looked as if it had never known weather. Men stepped out in dark coats. Women adjusted pearl earrings and silk scarves. Nobody hurried. Nobody looked afraid. That was what made it obscene. A crime in a dirty alley at least had the decency to look like one. This place had valet parking, wine glasses, and a guest list. Inside, the public rooms of the mansion had been converted into a private gallery. Glass cases stood under warm lights. Framed letters, field maps, uniforms, medals, engraved pistols, old photographs, each item displayed with a printed card and enough elegant language to make ownership feel like reverence. Brennan walked beside Nora Whitcomb through the main hall. He had not broken in. Nora had made sure of that. An old contact in the auction world had put his name on the entry list as a retired military consultant requested for a provenance dispute. Maggie Ellis had been allowed in for the public portion as local press. Before arriving, Nora had sent Graves and Vale written notice that one item in the private catalog might be stolen property. Lowell Graves could refuse them, but not without making the refusal look like fear. So Brennan entered through the front door, legally, openly, and every step felt more dangerous because of it. Nora wore her gray trench coat and carried a leather folder under one arm. She looked less like a guest than a woman preparing to cross-examine the walls. "Do not let him make this emotional," she murmured. Brennan looked at a case holding 3 medals beside a folded flag. "It already is. I mean, for him." Across the hall, Lowell Graves spotted them. For half a second, the smile vanished. Then it returned, polished and bloodless. Graves moved toward them in a dark suit, a glass of wine in one hand, his salt and pepper hair perfect beneath the gallery lights. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, "I was surprised to receive your message. I've been told I have that effect." His eyes shifted to Brennan. "And Mr. Holt, the retired SEAL. Brennan is here to help verify military items," Nora said. "How generous." "How necessary," Brennan replied. Graves smiled a little wider, but his gaze sharpened. Beyond the main room, a rope separated the public gallery from the private wing. That was where the real auction would happen. Not the harmless pieces with clean histories, but the closed catalog items. Anonymous family collections, unnamed estates, private transfers. Phrases designed to make stolen grief sound like paperwork. Outside, near a side waiting area, Evelyn sat with Maggie. Atlas lay at Evelyn's feet. The old dog was not allowed into the gallery proper, which suited Brennan fine. Too many strangers, too much noise, too many polished shoes and careless hands. Maggie had argued politely until the staff agreed Evelyn could wait in the adjoining lounge with Atlas beside her. Evelyn's hand rested on the dog's back, reading the tension in his body the way she read the world. Or when Atlas grew still, Evelyn knew someone unfamiliar had passed. When his breathing slowed, she knew he was listening. And when he gave a faint rumble in his chest, Maggie looked toward the hallway. That was the arrangement. Not a plan built on heroics. A plan built on human frailty, paperwork, timing, and one dog who knew the smell of the stolen box. Cole Ransom waited outside in an unmarked vehicle, relaying updates to Agent Rachel Mora. Mora herself had not yet entered. The federal line required more than suspicion. Nora had given her stolen property patterns across several states. Marcy had given a statement. Howard Bell had recorded what he remembered about Thomas, Elias Vane, and N-17. But Graves was careful. Careful men did not leave doors open. They left them unlocked just enough to deny they had done it. In the private gallery, Brennan finally saw the listing, Anonymous Military Valor Collection. The display case stood under a narrow beam of light. Inside lay Thomas Carr's medals arranged on dark blue velvet, each one labeled without a name. No Evelyn, no Thomas, no kitchen floor, no trembling hands. No blind woman touching metal each night to remember the husband she could no longer see. Just private provenance. Brennan leaned closer. One medal was wrong. Not fake, exactly, but incomplete. There was a gap in the arrangement, so small most buyers would never notice. A space where the most important piece should have been. The medal with the hidden mark along the inner edge was not in the case. Nora saw his expression. Missing? Yes. Could it be in storage? It's somewhere he doesn't want buyers touching. A staff member in a black suit approached them. Mr. Graves would like to speak with Mr. Holt privately. Nora's eyes hardened. Absolutely not. Brennan did not look away from the case. It's all right. No, it isn't. He wants to see what I know. And you want to let him. Brennan turned to her. I want to see who he's protecting. Nora held his gaze, then gave a sharp, unhappy nod. 5 minutes. Door open. The staff member led Brennan down a side corridor, lined with portraits of men who had probably never expected their walls to host stolen medals. And at the end was a smaller room, quieter, with glass cabinets and flat archival drawers. Wallace Breen stood near the far table. He was older than in the photographs, but age had not softened him. Tall, silver-haired, perfectly upright, dressed in a dark overcoat over a black turtleneck. His face had the fine, cold structure of a man used to being obeyed, even after the rank was gone. Thin black gloves covered his hands. He turned as Brennan entered. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Breen said, I knew someone like you would come. Brennan closed the door halfway, not fully. Someone like me? A man who mistakes old pain for duty. Brennan studied him. And you mistake buried truth for peace. Breen's mouth moved, almost a smile. Thomas Carr was a good soldier. But good soldiers often become poor historians, and they remember guilt more clearly than facts. What about Elias Vane? The name changed the room, not dramatically. Breen did not flinch, but his stillness tightened, the way ice tightens before cracking. Elias Vane died in war, Breen said. War is not a courtroom. No, but men still lie in both. Breen stepped closer to the table. You think truth heals people? Sometimes truth is just another weapon handed to those too wounded to carry it. Is that what you told Thomas? I told him Evelyn deserved peace. You used her as a leash. Breen's eyes cooled further. I prevented an old man from destroying lives over a memory shaped by trauma. Brennan felt the anger rise, but it did not take him. Not this time. He thought of Atlas stepping in front of him at the fundraiser. He thought of Evelyn's hand on the fake medal, searching for a dent that love remembered better than paper did. You don't protect people, Brennan said. You protect the version of the past that keeps your hands clean. For the first time, Breen looked tired. Then Graves entered quickly through another door. Wallace, he said, low and tight, we have a problem. Breen's gaze did not leave Brennan. Then solve it. Graves looked at Brennan, then back to Breen. That quick exchange told Brennan enough. The auction, the catalog, the missing medal, Graves was not the top of the hill. He was the man selling tickets to it. In the lounge, Atlas stood. Evelyn felt it at once. What is it? She asked. Maggie followed the dog's stare toward a side hallway near the service exit. A gallery employee moved through quickly, carrying a small velvet box no larger than a paperback book. Atlas gave a low sound and pulled against the leash. Not wild, not frantic, certain. Maggie's stomach dropped, and she had seen that box in one of Nora's internal photographs, or one like it. Dark velvet, silver hinge, the kind used to separate a valuable piece from a set. Brennan, she whispered, already reaching for her phone. Inside the back room, Brennan's phone vibrated once. Maggie's text appeared. Atlas reacted. Staff moving small velvet box to rear exit. Brennan looked from the screen to Graves. Graves saw it. His smooth face hardened. Brennan moved first, not toward Graves, but toward the hallway. Graves snapped something to the staff member by the door. Breen said nothing, which was worse. Silence from men like Breen was often permission. Brennan pushed through the service corridor. The mansion changed back there. No warm lights. No polished history. Just narrow halls, storage racks, packing crates. Exit signs buzzing green above the doors. He heard footsteps ahead, fast, controlled, and then a sharp sound from outside. Not a bark. Maggie shouting his name. Brennan hit the rear door and stepped into the cold. Atlas was at the edge of the gravel lot. Leash taut in Maggie's hands. Body angled toward a row of parked cars. Evelyn stood behind Maggie, one hand on the doorframe, face lifted toward the noise. A man in a black coat was moving quickly between vehicles. In his hand was the velvet box. Brennan ran. The man reached a dark sedan, fumbled the rear door open, and threw the box inside. Brennan closed the distance, but another body cut across his path, one of Graves's security men, broad, expressionless, professional enough not to swing first. That half-second was enough. The sedan door slammed. The engine turned. Atlas lunged forward, dragging Maggie a step before she caught herself. The dog's growl tore low through the cold air. The sedan rolled backward. Brennan shoved past the security man and reached the spot where the box had fallen open before being tossed into the car. Only the lid remained. Dark velvet, silver hinge, empty. The sedan disappeared down the service road, tail lights swallowed by trees. Behind Brennan, Graves stepped out into the cold with his coat buttoned and his face carefully restored. "What an unfortunate misunderstanding," he said. Brennan looked at the empty velvet lid in his hand, then at Atlas, still straining toward the vanished car. The metal was gone. The one piece Thomas Carr had marked. The one piece that could tie Elias Vane to N17 and turn rumor into something heavier. Brennan closed his hand around the empty lid. For the first time that night, Graves looked almost pleased. The sedan did not get far. That was the only reason Hope survived the first 30 seconds. The rear service road curved behind the mansion, then narrowed between a stone wall and a row of winter bare hedges. Whoever had planned the handoff had counted on speed, darkness, and confusion. They had not counted on an old German shepherd with a bandaged leg and a memory for scent stronger than any polished lie inside that house. Atlas pulled hard toward the far end of the gravel lot. "Easy," Brennan said, though he did not mean stop. The dog's ears were forward. His body was low, controlled. Every line of him pointed toward the same place. Not frantic, certain. Maggie stood behind them, one hand still on Evelyn's arm. Evelyn's face was turned toward the noise, her blind eyes pale in the cold light spilling from the service door. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. Brennan did not answer yet, and he saw the dark sedan idling near the hedge line, brake lights bleeding red across the wet gravel. Lowell Graves stood beside it, one gloved hand gripping the open rear door. Another man, thin, gray-coated, forgettable in the deliberate way of men paid to be overlooked, held a small velvet pouch. Not the box. The pouch. That meant the metal had already been removed. Graves turned when he heard the gravel shift beneath Brennan's boots. For the first time since this began, his face did not arrange itself quickly enough. "Mr. Holt," he said, "you seem to have a habit of appearing where you are not invited." Brennan stopped several feet away, close enough to hold him there, far enough not to give him what he wanted. Atlas stood beside Brennan, growling low, not attacking, not lunging, just present. A living boundary with old teeth and a clear purpose. And the man in the gray coat took one step backward. Graves noticed the movement and snapped, "Stay." Brennan's right hand stayed near his jacket pocket. His phone was already recording. He had turned it on when Maggie's call came through, an instinct born not from technology, but from experience. Men like Graves loved private rooms. They loved words that vanished once spoken. Not this time. "I need that pouch," Brennan said. Graves gave a humorless smile. "This is absurd. You have no legal authority here." "No." "Then move." "No." The small word did what anger could not. It held the night still. Graves looked toward the mansion, then toward the service road. For a man who had spent his life arranging beautiful exits, he suddenly had very few. "You people," he said softly, "always become sentimental at the worst possible moment." Brennan watched him. Graves's voice lowered. "Do you honestly think Mrs. Carr understands what she had? A blind old woman keeping historic military artifacts in a wooden box by a fireplace, handling them with bare fingers, letting a dog sleep beside them?" Atlas's growl deepened. Brennan did not move. Graves continued, the polish breaking away now, piece by piece. In a proper collection, those medals would be preserved, documented, displayed, valued, owned, Brennan said. Graves's eyes sharpened. That is what this is really about, Brennan said. You don't preserve history. You purchase other people's grief, put glass around it, and call that respect. Graves stepped closer, forgetting the phone he did not know was listening. Respect, he said. Respect is not leaving priceless objects to rot in small houses with people who cannot even see them. Behind Brennan, Evelyn made a small sound, not a sob, and a breath struck by truth. Brennan heard it, and something in him settled. Not rage, not victory, something colder and cleaner. There it was, the sentence Graves had never said on a stage, the truth under the suit. Before Graves could recover, headlights swept across the service road. 2 vehicles pulled in fast but controlled. Deputy Cole Ransom stepped out of the first. He was out of uniform, but his badge hung from his belt. From the second vehicle came a woman in a dark federal jacket, compact, calm, and moving with the efficient stillness of someone who did not waste motion. Agent Rachel Mora. Brennan had never met her in person, but he recognized her immediately from Cole's description. Dark hair pulled tight, sharp eyes, no appetite for drama. Mr. Graves, she said, holding up identification. Step away from this vehicle. Graves went pale, then angry, then insulted. 3 masks in 2 seconds. This is a private event. Not anymore. Cole moved to the man in the gray coat, took the pouch without flourish, and handed it to Mora. She opened it under the beam of a flashlight. Inside lay a medal. Small, heavy, old enough to carry more silence than shine. Mora looked to Brennan. Can Mrs. Carr identify it? Brennan turned. Evelyn stood near the service door, Maggie beside her. The old widow looked fragile under the cold light. But when she heard the question, her chin lifted. I can try, she said. Mora placed the medal into a clean cloth first, then guided it into Evelyn's waiting hands. The night seemed to gather around her fingers. Evelyn touched the face, the edge, the inner rim. Her thumb slowed near a place no eye could easily find. Then she stopped. There, she whispered. Mora leaned closer. What do you feel? A mark, inside the rim. Mora took the medal back and angled her flashlight. Brennan watched her expression change. Not surprise. Confirmation. She read aloud, careful and low. E. Vane, N17. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Graves did not. The name did not belong to the auction house. It did not belong to Breen. And it did not belong to donors, collectors, catalog language, or men who believed time made theft respectable. It belonged to the soldier they had tried to erase. Elias Vane, N17. The place Thomas Carr had refused to forget. Graves was arrested without spectacle. That felt important somehow. No grand speech, no dramatic collapse, just handcuffs, Miranda rights, the sound of gravel beneath federal boots, and a rich man realizing the night would not bend itself around him after all. Breen was not arrested there. Men like Wallace Breen rarely fell in one clean motion. But Nora moved faster than his lawyers. By midnight, her article was live. She published the connection between Graves and Vale, the stolen veteran collections, the altered photograph, the Carr medals, and Wallace Breen's role as authentication advisor for the private sale. She did not accuse beyond what she could support, and that made it worse for Breen. Facts, arranged carefully, had a way of cutting deeper than outrage. By morning, 2 veterans' foundations had suspended Breen's advisory roles. A military heritage board issued a statement so empty it sounded like panic wearing a tie. Agent Mora confirmed that the Elias Vane file would be referred for review. And somewhere, a family that had spent years believing one clean version of a death was about to hear that the truth might have been dirtier, lonelier, and long overdue. Sheriff Kessler was not dragged away in disgrace. Life was rarely that satisfying. But his department's handling of prior theft reports came under review. His ties to Graves-funded community grants were suddenly questions instead of background noise. Men who had hidden behind procedure began discovering that procedure could turn its face toward them too, and the medals came home that evening. Not to a stage, not to the town hall, not under a flag large enough to tell people what to feel. They came back to Evelyn Carr's small living room, where the broken window had been repaired, where the old wooden case sat on the table, and where Atlas lay with his bandaged leg tucked carefully beneath him. Brennan placed the case in Evelyn's lap. For a long moment, she did not open it. Her hands rested on the lid. Thin hands, brave hands, hands that had memorized a husband after her eyes gave up the work. "May I?" she asked. No one answered, because no one in that room had the right to grant permission. She opened the case herself. One by one, she touched the medals. Her fingers moved slowly, with reverence but not weakness. She found the repaired edge, the slight unevenness near one ribbon bar, and the small dent on the left side of the medal Thomas had dropped on the kitchen floor the first day home. At that, she smiled. A small, astonished smile, as if Thomas had done it again, clumsy and apologetic, in the middle of the room. Then she found the final medal. Her thumb moved to the inner rim, stopped. Her other hand rested on Atlas's head. The dog lay still, muzzle against her old shoes, as if he understood the ceremony better than any crowd ever could. Evelyn bent forward slightly. "Thomas," she whispered. No one interrupted. She lifted her face, tears running silently down the lines age had made. "Yes," she said. "This is Thomas." The words did not repair everything. They did not bring back the years Thomas had carried fear. They did not bring Elias Vane home from Amru. And they did not erase Marcy's betrayal, Howard's silence, Kessler's cowardice, or Brennan's long habit of standing apart from the living. But they returned one thing to its rightful place. And sometimes justice began that small. Agent Mora stood near the doorway, notebook closed. She was not sentimental, but her voice softened when Evelyn turned toward her. "I will need your statement, Mrs. Carr, only when you're ready." Evelyn placed both hands on the open case. "I am ready." Brennan looked at her. She was blind, elderly, small in a chair that seemed to hold more years than wood. And yet in that moment, she was the strongest person in the room. "I did not see their faces," Evelyn said, "but I remember voices. I remember what was said to me. I remember what my husband left behind. If I need to tell it again and again, I will." Mora nodded once. "That will matter." "It always mattered," Evelyn said. "People only forgot to listen." Across the room, Marcy Vale began to cry. She had come because Mora allowed it, because her statement would be part of the case, and because Evelyn had asked that she not be hidden like another shameful object in a drawer. Marcy stood near the wall, pale, exhausted, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles looked bloodless. Evelyn did not offer forgiveness like a gift wrapped in ribbon. She offered something harder. "You will tell the truth too," she said. Marcy nodded. "I will. And you will live with it afterward." Yes, that was all. It was enough. Howard Bell heard the news by phone from Nora. Later, she told Brennan the old man had cried without making a sound. Not because he was relieved, because relief had come too late to be clean. He had lived long enough to see the ground crack, but not long enough to forget all the years he had helped keep it covered. Some of the stolen veteran collections were traced by Mora's team within days. Others were already gone, scattered into private rooms where men could admire courage without ever being asked to practice it. The ending, Brennan thought, was not clean. Maybe clean endings belonged to speeches. Real ones came with missing pieces. Night settled gently over the road between Brennan's house and Evelyn's. The dinner invitation came after everyone else had left. "You should eat before you go," Evelyn said. Brennan was already reaching for his jacket. "I should check on my place. Your place will survive one meal. I don't want to impose." Evelyn turned her face toward him. "Brennan Holt, you have bled anxiety all over my floor for a week. Sitting down for soup is not the imposition." Maggie laughed into her sleeve. Even Mora looked away, possibly to hide the smallest smile. Brennan opened his mouth to refuse again, but Atlas solved the matter. The dog rose, walked to the porch, found the small ceramic bowl, and pushed it gently with his nose. It scraped across the wood with a soft, ridiculous sound. Evelyn laughed. "See?" she said. "The regular guest knows supper time better than his owner." For the first time in days, Brennan laughed too. Not much, not loudly, but it did not sound broken. "Traitor," he told Atlas. Evelyn reached down and laid her hand on the dog's head. "No," she said. "He just found his way home before you did." Brennan stood there with his old flannel jacket in his hand, looking through Evelyn's open door toward the dark road and the faint shape of his own house beyond the trees. 100 meters. For years, it had been enough distance to call loneliness peace. Now it looked like a path. He sat down. Atlas settled beside Evelyn's chair, the ceramic bowl waiting, his eyes half closed in the warmth. And outside, the road between the two houses lay quiet beneath the porch lights, no longer a border. Just a way back. Sometimes, what the world calls old things are really the last pieces of love someone has left. Evelyn could not see the medals, but she remembered every mark because love had taught her hands what her eyes could no longer hold. And Brennan learned that peace does not always mean staying away from other people's pain. Sometimes peace begins when we finally step across the road and help someone carry it. Maybe God's grace does not always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes softly, through an old dog at the door, a neighbor who refuses to look away, or one small truth that finally finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and consider subscribing for more stories of loyalty, courage, and hope. May you find peace in the memories you carry, and may grace meet you gently where you need it most.